I hear from your question that I somehow adapted and changed based on my encounter with Bob Monroe. And I think I need to explain to you, it's probably bigger than that. I mean, I grew up in this world. My mom talked to dead people. She used to practice levitating with her high school girlfriends. This was all very regular stuff to me. So when I found myself in the Army and opened this book by Puthoff and Targ saying this stuff about remote viewing, it was like, well, of course I do that. They call that remote viewing? Oh, I didn't understand that. So this is all...
Old school.
Yes, it's, it's like, well, isn't that interesting? You have a name for this, kind of a thing. So, and I have many, many experiences myself, many wonderful hemisync experiences myself. But your question is very interesting because Bob Monroe, who grew up as a boy, went to college, went to New York, became a successful businessman in New York, he probably didn't know consciously in his head he was going to change the world. He probably didn't realize that his movement would be one spoke in the wheel of the evolution of human consciousness. So those are things we think about in a conscious level. You think, well, I'm going to go do this now, and I'm going to do this now, and I have these plans. But there's probably a bigger scheme going on than we consciously realize from moment to moment. Bob always looked at me, because I was into computers and collecting data and measuring brain waves and everything, as being the big thing in his own conscious mind. And he'd come to me and he said, what do you have to tell me today? Well, 87% of this and divided by 2 and this. And so when Bob died, my first experience of him was I had a warning screen flash up on my old 386 computer that said, no end to data. That isn't a screen that's in the software package. So I said, hi, Bob, push the escape key. So he came to me in a way that I would recognize. One other experience of him, and this is, well, actually I'll talk about participants experiencing him too, but a personal experience that I can personally testify to is at the Roberts Mountain Retreat campus up on the hill. There was a time that I went up there, and I was preparing the area to receive some visitors, and I was going to give the visitors a tour. And here I'd driven all the way up on the hill, and I didn't have a key to get in the door. And Bob Monroe spoke to me in as clear a voice as listening to you, and said, the key is on the window sill. And I just said, oh, good. And I walked over to the windowsill, picked it up off the windowsill, and opened the door, and the people drove up in the car, and it was fine. Now, I wasn't, on my knees, oh, my goodness, I just had this wonderful experience. Oh, this is really spooky, and everything. It was regular to me. It was ordinary. It was okay, It wasn't any big deal. Other people have had experiences with Bob. People who come through our programs and who never met Bob. Bob died in '95. It's now 2008. People come through the programs about 1,000 a year. And sometimes they'll come out of one of their experiences, and people are sitting in this room where I am right now, and they're sharing, well, during my experience, this happened, and I found myself, walking along, and this happened, and so forth. And every now and then there's someone who comes down and said, well, I had an experience, but I don't understand it. And we say, well, tell us a little bit about it. He says, well, there was this man. Yes, well, it was very funny because he was carrying a very small little dog. And Bob had a dog called Steamboat, which he just loved, and he was very close to this little dog called Steamboat. So we leaned forward and say, well, tell me more about this. What did this man say to you? And we're expecting this proclamation of the knowledge of the universe. And he said, well, this guy said I should have fun. And we're like, okay, is there anybody else who would like to share? And that's Bob. I mean, in everything they did around here, and when he would talk to people, he'd say, you know, this is supposed to be fun, learning all this stuff and discovering who you are. And so when we get a little message like that, it wasn't the proclamation and the ultimate secrets to the universe. It was just, you know, as I'm saying those words, maybe that is the ultimate secret to the universe.